So, hello everyone. We are on a second IBM Spectrum Professional webinars. So, I'm quite excited to have Steve Keniston right now with me. Steve, good morning.
Good morning.
Everybody from in India, in the Europe and Asia, good afternoon and good evening. So, we have a different time zones. There have been a bunch of people connected to me. So I think we'll have roughly 50 participants today. We have more or less 100 registrations. So let's see how it's going. We do also have the John O'Connor. I think John still is struggling and fighting with the audio. So welcome, John. And today we will talk about data protection, modernization, restore, reuse, reinvent. So our special guest is Steve. Steve, I will interrupt you during the session. So could you introduce yourself and tell a few words about yourself? I don't want to mess it up anything here.
No worries, no worries. So first I want to say, Paul, thank you very much for doing this. I think this is a really exciting time, and to really drive the social aspect of what you're doing here in LinkedIn and getting everyone together, especially around the data protection part of the IBM portfolio is tremendous. So I just wanted to say thank you. To everyone, my name is Steve Keniston. I run business development for the IBM Spectrum Storage software portfolio. So anything having to do with the software is kind of my responsibility. And I actually have spent a lot of time over the last 20 plus years focusing on data protection between Avamar, EMC, Connected Corporation, IBM Tape at one point, as well as I was at Veritas for a while, and even as an analyst covering the entire data protection space. So pretty passionate about data protection. So while the portfolio is my responsibility, data protection's kind of my baby.
Yep, and I've seen Steve on VMAC in Poland. So he's doing a tremendous work to promote the Spectrum Protect portfolio right now. But what is more important is his experience. So during a session, just ask us a question about the trends, the way when the IBM is going, because right now I think we're in the momentum that IBM is doing a brilliant job. So I think many of you is interested in which direction it will go. Yes. Last time we have a Harley who much more focused on the Spectrum Protect. Today we're only talking about the SPP, so Spectrum Protect Plus.
Great. So you ready?
Yep.
Sure. So also what I want to try to do is just kind of highlight it here in the beginning, just a few things that we're seeing in the marketplace around, I think data protection modernization or evolution or the next generation data protection. I think all of that stuff is overused, maybe because data protection has been a key part of every environment for a number of years, and any vendor who wants to sell you something needs to give you a reason to buy. There's going to be some compelling reason. So with that as a baseline and a kind of a foundation, let me just take you through some of the things that we see. And then hopefully what we can do is, as John O'Connor pops on, my colleague who's a Spectrum Protect Plus technical specialist, he can provide you with, we'll do a nice demonstration of kind of where we see, where Spectrum Protect Plus is and kind of how we see the world evolving here. So with that, over the course of this presentation, you might hear a few terms, right? So modernization. What I tried to do here is just kind of outline what do we think of, or what do we hear, or what is our thoughts when we see some of these terms. When clients are talking to us and we see things like modernization or operational recovery, data-driven, data reuse, all key indicating terms, especially if you're talking about protection, that are some of the key things to get them to move into the next level, right? I want to be able to do things like derive insights out of my business. That's a data-driven business. I want to be able to have the opportunity to reuse applications or reuse data that's in my data protection silo, right? And that's the ability to do data reuse. A lot of companies today turning to things like DevOps, right? And the ability to automate or orchestrate that data and then provide self-service to help that automation. All key indicators that there is a trend or a thought or something around the business wanting to evolve their existing environment from just moving data to a backup repository, but then getting the ability to extract the value out of that data repository. So when I think data protection modernization, I think of 5 key things. So take protect and protect plus out of it just for a second, right? What would be the things that would want to drive me to go invest in a protection environment, right? So first of all, a lot of the net new solutions in the marketplace around data protection drive lower cost. And when I say drive lower cost, I mean they start out at because they've been built in a much more modern way, they start out in a less expensive way. And by deploying them less expensively, as they continue to grow, because data is always obviously continuing to grow, right? Even your new maintenance or your new license fees grow at a much slower pace. Now, even though I've been in the protection business for a long time, I like to say data protection is more of an insurance policy. At least that was the old thinking, right? So I don't want to spend a lot on it. The other thing is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if I want to be able to lower the cost and then keep it growing at a much lower pace, to take that additional budget money and apply it to other things, I really need to kind of drive costs down. The other thing is improve performance. And I don't mean getting the data from point A to point B. I mean more RPOs and RTOs. Because newer next generation solutions are based on snapshotting technology, I can quickly create the backup or the snapshot, and I can quickly instantiate that snapshot from a recovery perspective. So I've got a whole bunch more flexibility in my RPOs and RTOs. Third would be the simplicity in management or SLA management. A lot of businesses want to make sure they're aligning to business SLAs to keep the business up and running. When you combine that with a lot of the design thinking that businesses are putting into their interfaces and taking in the constituents a lot more of who's using the product, these products are getting simpler to use, and simplicity means ease of management, and ease of management means lower operational cost. The next thing I look at is the cloud enablement side of things. If you think about Spectrum Protect, right, there are over 400 million lines of code within Spectrum Protect. Every time I want to do something with Spectrum Protect, like add a feature, add a capability, I need to make sure all 400 million lines of code come with me. A lot of these new products are built with microservices and built agilely, and they take into account on the initial build connecting to the cloud. So a lot of things, because a lot of folks have cloud strategies, a lot of these newer solutions connect to the cloud a lot simply. Now, the fifth thing, and the thing I think is most important, where we're seeing a lot of traction, is this notion around the enhanced business enablement. So the ability to take all of the data that I back up into my silo of my backup repository, now let's strategically use that data to gain insights about the business, or to be able to do new things like application development and that sort of thing. So those are 5 key reasons that we see clients should be looking at modernizing their particular backup environment.
And I really like this, because I also, could you come back? I also using many times this insurance policy. So I think it's important that we used to have this philosophy that you sign the contract for the year or for the 2 or 3 years, you just forget, yes? So you've been a little bit pain about paying this insurance policy, but if something happened, then you can easily come back, yes? But right now, I think this reuse is really important, that this insurance is changing, yes? This is a new way how to selling the value and this insurance. So I hopefully you will explain how you see it in your right now. So the changing from the traditional point of view to the modernized data protection.
Sure, we have a couple examples here that talk about kind of the before and the after and where we're going. So the other thing that we talk about is, I mentioned this a little bit when we think about the design thinking and kind of the change in the evolution of how vendors are building products. It's really important to IBM to really understand who we're building the products for. So what we've done is we've narrowed down to 4 folks within an environment that really, I think, who cares and why about backup, right? You have the business leader. They need to achieve maximum uptime. But in addition, they're driven to be able to find ways to create new revenue. as always, a business leader has to figure out ways around cost reduction, and a lot of times that comes in the form of a cloud strategy, but not necessarily, but maybe, right? Then we have the line of business, right? And when I say line of business inside of an organization, what I'm really talking about are the different groups inside of a company, right? Do I mean the application development team? There's the VM admin team. There's the database administrators. There are things like marketing and operations, sales operations support. Each one of those sometimes has a reason or desire to have access to the data. You also have your day-to-day knowledge worker. This would be, this is Steve working on my PowerPoint, and I can't have it fail, and I need to be able to get it back. And then at the lowest possible rung, but probably the biggest piece of the pyramid, is the infrastructure team. They're essentially accountable to make sure that the business has no downtime. And now with the new requirements at the business leader level, right, they want to be able to help the business generate revenue by providing them access to data. And overall, too, they're accountable for looking at all the different solutions in the market to make sure that they're driving the lowest cost to help them do all of these things. Now, it's a cross section, right? There's you need to be able to do these things for each one of the constituents within the environment. And hopefully what we've been able to do is, by looking at these different folks within the environment, is provide some insights around, how you might think about this if you're one of these folks within the environment. The other thing I'm seeing a lot of, and I thought this was very interesting, I've seen this exact chart from two different customers in two different presentations in the course of 2 weeks. So this is really starting to become a trend. And what you see here is not something where the company is saying that the number of people they're going to require is becoming less, but what you see is a shift in the skill set. So you see in Q4 2017, a lot of admins and operations folks. And when you get out to Q4 2020, you see what they are calling the infrastructure developer. So what that really says to me is, what clients are looking for is to build a programmatic infrastructure such that as folks within the organization that we just pointed out, the line of business or the knowledge worker, need to get access to that infrastructure, they can so easily and programmatically. It's very simple is what we're trying to say, right? Because what we want IT to be doing is focusing on other things that are really more strategic to the business. I'll talk a little bit about how this plays out as we move forward with some of the features in the product around self-service and roles-based access. The other thing that we're seeing, and this is becoming more of a trend too, is this notion around operational recovery. Now, I tend to call this more data management, only because the operational recovery comes with not only just bringing data back to be used to recover in the event of a data loss, but it's also to provide access to lines of business in the case that they need access to data for particular business reasons. In addition, we still have your traditional backup, so this backup and recovery aspect. And then you're starting to see the lines kind of blur between backup and archive, where traditional backup applications continue to kind of sometimes be folks' long-term retention place where they put their archives. Now, the interesting thing when we talk about, so we've talked about, recover your applications and that sort of thing, but now we want to dive into a little bit of the data reuse use case kind of notion, right? So not only can Spectrum Protect Plus do the fully automated recoveries, and we talk about fully automated because not only can I set a policy to back up every day at say 5 p.m., I can also create a policy that says, or a template that says, hey, every morning at 5 a.m., I want data up and available, which is essentially a recovery. The workflow is the same, but I want to make this data available for, the application development team, or I want to make it available for the DBAs, so that they can go off and do their jobs on the freshest data possible. You also have the ability to do automated disaster recovery. So I think a lot of us know disaster recovery planning and testing, right? It usually involves coming in over the weekend. We've got to shut things down. We've got to, spin things up in other locations. Because Spectrum Protect Plus has these capabilities of spinning up applications in different locations in fenced off environments, you can actually test the recovery of any piece of your environment at any time to make sure you're covered in case of a disaster. Now, those two really focus on the recovery aspect and keeping the business running, more the insurance policy we just talked about. But in the forward-looking aspect of the corporation, you have things like test and dev, or DevOps, DevOps being a key new thing that's happening in the industry. You have things like reporting and analytics, and I intentionally, from a reporting standpoint, threw in here GDPR, and I'll talk a little bit about that in some of our slides. I talk about patch management, right? Always a chore for IT to be doing, and we try to simplify that by leveraging your existing data. But the thing I want to point out is, in any particular case where someone comes to IT looking for access to a copy of their data, is an ability to be able to take advantage of something like Spectrum Protect Plus, be able to reuse that capacity for any one of those business needs. So philosophically, and this comes more down to what we're doing here at IBM, right? I think if you look at the left-hand side of this slide, the data sources, and you look at the right-hand side of the slide, the data targets, right? They're both always continuing to evolve, right? So at the data source side, things change. You have your traditional applications, hypervisors came, containers are coming, you had scale-out environments, you had hypervisor environments, and then now you're having these as-a-service environments. And on the right-hand side, we started with tape, then we had tape and disk, then we had tape, disk, and cloud, and now we're having object storage. What we're trying to say here is, I think from IBM's perspective, is we understand that both sides of this equation are going to continue to evolve. And what we want to make sure of is that when we help clients as they go through each evolution, is to not restrict them on the front end or the back end. If they see something out there that they want to invest in from a data sources side, let's do that, right? Feel free to go off and do that and know that you'll be protected. Or if something changes on the back end where you need better availability, lower price, that sort of thing, please go ahead and invest in it, right? What we want to focus on is the middle piece, the secondary data management piece. And our fundamental philosophy as we move forward is, first of all, from a data management perspective, we need to have these core things, right? We need to make sure that the rules and policies engines are robust enough to manage everything, that we're managing all of your retention for you. We have this robust catalog, which we'll go to here in a second. We provide the right monitoring and report capabilities for your business, including if you're an as-a-service type business. And now you're starting to talk about things like automation, orchestration, self-service, basically releasing the constraints of what happens with backup with APIs such that you can actually access that information. Now, all of that...
Just to interrupt, somebody is drilling the wall right now. That's why I didn't want to, I couldn't join to the before slides. For all of the audience, I think this slide is really crucial because we see how the world is changing and how the world modernize their own infrastructure. From the left side, we do not only talk about the traditional apps, typical hypervisors, but we have containers, SaaS, different storages. And on the right, I remember when I first designed, the backups, it was, this to tape, this to tape. And there was mainly two ways how to go to the customer side and propose the ideal solution. And I remember when we have an incremental, when I was working at IBM, when we have an incremental forever, it was enough to say that we are better than the others. Today, we can see that the right side on the slide, on the left, it's a huge movement, and it's giving us, let's say, the huge complexity. So this man in the middle, or the girl, it's really important because it needs to have the strings and APIs to connect all of these different pieces together.
Right, totally agree. Totally agree. So just to finish out this particular slide, and I think it's important, the harder you make things, the harder it is to get things done. So fundamentally, I think what IBM has done is what we've said is let's boil down backup to what are the most important capabilities around what is a backup. And those really come down to the ingestion, right, or the data copying, or making a copy of the data, the ability to move that data, right, and the ability to store that data, but store that data efficiently. So those four things really provide a foundation of when we look at putting data in a repository, right? How do we do that as efficiently as possible for you while still keeping in play everything that Pawel just talked about from the front end and being able to drive that smartly and efficiently through APIs, right? So we'll do everything on the front end to be able to ingest or make copies of that information as easily as possible, but we want to provide a common copy service for everything. So you do things one time and you do it the same way. We want to provide common move services. Again, doing it one time and doing it the same way. Same thing with optimization set of capabilities, right? We don't want you to have to compress and dedupe and uncompress and re-dedupe or undedupe if you're moving it from platform to platform on the back end. We want to drive a lot of consistency, so it's just moving data as efficiently as possible. So that's kind of our fundamental philosophy around this. So now let's actually, this is an interesting scenario, right? I think a lot of you know about, or maybe you don't, but if you're in a boat, right? If you start to drown, someone throws you a life ring. But if you get on the boat and you want to be proactive in case you do fall over, you wear a life vest. And this is a good analogy for when we think about how protection is evolving. So if you think about traditional data protection, when you run a backup, that is the only time data gets entered into your backup catalog. So my backup catalog knows nothing about my environment. It just knows about the one task, the backup that I did, right? And finding anything in that backup when you need to recover it can be very difficult. So the catalogs of today, specifically, right, the Spectrum Protect Plus catalog, right, what ends up happening is when you install the product, the next thing you do is you register your virtual centers, your applications, your virtual centers are your applications. And if you think about, you know, I'll let you guys in on a little secret, right? In Q3, we're bringing together the hardware piece, the copy data management piece, the Spectrum CDM into Spectrum Protect Plus. So once you register your application, your VM, your virtual center, or your array to Spectrum Protect Plus, we go out and we interrogate your entire data set, and we fill the catalog. We create a catalog proactively that says, here's your data. Now, if any of you have gone to the marketplace and downloaded Protect Plus for free and kind of seen this, you know what I'm talking about. In the front, in the user interface, we'll instantly tell you the moment it's been registered, how many applications are being protected and how many aren't being protected. Now, at first you might think, well, obviously there's nothing being protected, but what this allows you to do, right, is to then be able to manage your environment by exception. So now you can say, okay, I have all of these things. I go in and I create a few SLA policies, and then I can say, let's assign the right data to the right policy. And when you think about where you're going with things like tagging your applications or tagging your VMs, you can now put the hands of protection or put the responsibility of protection in the hands of the administrator. Now what they can do is they can say, okay, there's a gold policy out there. I'm going to tag this as gold. So now every time the gold policy runs, this particular application gets backed up. In addition, by doing copy management functions, which is what Spectrum Protect Plus does, making those snapshot copies, as you make a copy, you may or may not want to back that up. So when you go into your environment and you see there are 15 VMs unprotected, that might be okay. That might be part of the design. That might be where development is working on some stuff. And it doesn't necessarily need to be protected until they've got the final instance that they want to protect. That's the one that they want to build. So what we're starting to see is this whole evolution around, you know, how catalogs used to work in the past and kind of where we're going into the future.
I got a few questions on private. I didn't know why people writing me private. I write to everyone. No worries. So how we position the traditional backup with the existing portfolio, Steve, with this modern data protection that IBM introduced, I think more than roughly a year ago. Yes.
Correct.
So if you could a little bit advise our user group how they should say advise to their customers on their own teams, and where the IBM is going with these two methods. Yes.
Sure. So I think what you're going to see over time, that's a very good question. You're going to see these methodologies slowly start to come together. So if you're a part of the initial adoption phase of Spectrum Protect Plus, you're aware that through the integration we can actually do recover. So if you take data and you back it up in your vSnap repository, which John will go into when we do the demonstration, right? And you can offload that data for longer term retention into Spectrum Protect. We have the ability through Spectrum Protect Plus to understand the Protect catalog, meaning should you want to recover a piece of data that you've migrated into Protect from Protect Plus, you can do that. So that was step one. Step two, what you're going to start to see is the front end set of capabilities that are in Protect Plus become the front end to Protect. Why? It's more modern, easier to use, SLA driven, all of the feature benefits that clients want today. That doesn't mean we're getting rid of any of the functionality that is in Protect. We're just saying there are easier ways through design thinking to be able to help clients instantiate that through fewer selections, modern terminology, and that sort of thing. As you start to see that, you're going to see the Protect Plus kind of interface also driving data into the Protect Plus catalog. The Protect Plus catalog is a MongoDB, right? It's a highly scalable catalog, very simple and easy to use, highly searchable, kind of thing. So the ability to find stuff is a lot easier than traditional. And what we're going to start to see is the ability for the MongoDB to be able to drill down into the traditional or the existing DB2 environment to be able to pull data out for recovery purposes. So not quickly. This isn't happening tomorrow. These will slowly blend together over a longer period of time, and you'll just automatically get that feature functionality, no matter which product you're using.
So I think also, so for all of the traditional specialists that they're using today's Spectrum Protect natively, so they don't need to worry about that something happened and they need to get rid of in the next, let's say, even 1 year or 2 years, is a natural extension. So the Plus is giving the new possibilities to much more use this data against the traditional way how to store the data and come back to every, let's say, the statistics show that only 5% of the data is just for this restoration. So if you use for the modern data analytics and DevOps, we can have much more, let's say, value from this secondary storage that we have on Spectrum Protect Plus, as I guess.
Certainly, yes.
So this mixing philosophy, but of course, every year we'll see much more movement into the new modern data protection move. Yeah, one more question, even two. John already answered, but do we using the Java for the Spectrum Protect Plus? Right now it's a RESTful API, so the modern architecture provides us that everything goes through the REST and so all of the UI will be HTML5 written in JS Angular. So you will see on a demo that is really fast, really modern, and really easy to customize. So you can imagine that you can even hide the SPP as a not front end, and you can build your own visualization to manage. For example, you are the managed service provider or the customers. So this new approach with the RESTful API, we're giving you a choice how the Spectrum Protect in the end should look like.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point. At the end of the day, we see the ability to want that repository of data to be as nimble as possible, and by building on a RESTful API and leveraging microservices, we allow you to talk to things like, so for example, things that might not have been interesting in the past, but maybe now your DevOps team who is using Chef or Puppet wants to be able to talk to the backup to be able to get a copy of data. Now they'll have the ability to do that. Whereas before, that was never possible.
Yeah, the user group is saying that Java was always a headache. I remember this joke when, knock, knock, who's there? 10 seconds, nothing, and Java. So it's, the IT joke. But I remember when the IBM introduced the admin center, and I don't want to, just flattered. It was, I remember when I was installed the first one, and I, waiting 15 or 20 seconds for every query that I get from the old HTML in a half a second. So no worries, there is no Java in the Protect Plus. We're going into the better and faster direction. So go on, Steve, on the next slide.
Sure. So this is just to highlight the fact that obviously we're not changing our strategic thinking. We understand that to the customer, the workloads that generate the data for the business are the most important, right? And so we just kind of have an example here that we're going to continue to march and protect all of the different workloads that are important for your organization. What we're trying to do is to be able to provide the capability to first provide that operational recovery to just keep the business running with it, to shrinking those recovery times objectives to as near zero as possible. And how do you do that, right? Today, with the technology that's out there, you leverage snapshotting capabilities. And in addition, right, the ability to access information. The other thing we don't want to do is give you the power to kill yourself, right? And what I mean by that is, providing things like, I've talked to a number of different customers where I say, I'm never giving self-service to any of my clients, right? Well, or any of my end users, right? But what we've tried to, because what they don't want to have happen is them to recover data to a production environment and screw something up. That's what I kind of mean by taking yourself out. What we want to be able to do is provide you multiple ways and multiple angles to get this operational recovery or data access. So should you have permissions, if you're the backup administrator, do full recoveries because you know what you're doing. But should you want to be able to pull data up in a fenced off environment that will not impact production, do that quickly, simply, and easily without the waiting around for IT to have to figure out how to do that for you. And then additionally, right, we recognize that long-term retention is still a must, right? Whether you're in a compliance world or you need to be able to satisfy e-discovery requirements, or you just need to have data for business purposes. I want to run analytics and see what happened over the last 12 months to make some strategic decisions about, in the retail space, how do I buy my next, for the next go around? How do I do that, right? All supporting still the whatever backend you want, as we talked about in the earlier slide, whether it be disk, tape, cloud, object, as things grow or as things start to evolve down here, the ability to make sure that data at rest is stored as efficiently as possible and as economically as possible. So what I wanted to do here is just give you a high level, and John's going to do more of the architecture in his presentation here, but I just give you a high level view of what Spectrum Protect Plus looks like. And then we'll go into some of the feature functionality and set of capabilities for each of the different constituents and why we think it plays out and makes a difference, right? So we talked about the backup administrator who sets the policy. We talk about the fact that Spectrum Protect Plus is an agentless solution backing up your hypervisors. Today we support SQL and Hyper-V, and your applications, Oracle and SQL, that sit on physical systems. So the key to understanding this is that through API injection, agentlessly, we will go and we will protect these systems. Today we support Hyper-V and VMware. Today it's Oracle and SQL, and we have a pretty strong roadmap for what's to come. That data is then snapped or copied into what we call the vSnap repository, and we have blueprint and sizing guides to help you figure out how to size that particular environment, depending on if you want things like compression, deduplication, etc. Once the data is there, as I mentioned before, we're integrated with Spectrum Protect. You can offload that, and it supports anything, any target base that Spectrum Protect supports, disk-based, tape, cloud, or object. You can replicate that vSnap repository to a remote data center, or you can even replicate that copy up into the cloud. Then what happens is, you have your roles-based access set of capabilities. So this really highlights kind of all the different features of the product. Each admin can have a separate set of policies. And from that set of policies, they can either do recovery, bring the data back to the hypervisor, or they can do what we call data reuse in any one of those. They can do it in the cloud, they can do it on-prem, they can do it in the remote data center. They can reuse that data the way they like to use it with any application they like in any particular location. So it's a very flexible, robust system. So now what I've tried to do is take 4 quick scenarios, right? And talk about the before and the after in each one of these scenarios and kind of the feature functions that help support this, right? So I'll talk about this first one probably a little bit more in depth, but a lot of them tend to be repetitive, so I want to leave time for, make sure John has plenty of time. But what we've said is, in the first slide is always the before slide, right? The business, in a data loss or corruption scenario, the business leader really has to be able to understand, they fear risk, right? Data loss or corruption, and reputation exposure. Hey, I lost something, and that's a big deal for someone like a Target or something like that. And in addition, right, that translates into revenue loss, whether it be downtime or expense to users not working. From a knowledge worker line of business standpoint, the ability to not work due to no access to data, it can be really costly. And then if you look at the process that IT needs to go through in order to recover an environment, it tends to be pretty lengthy, right? I've got to find the data, I've got to look at the catalog, do I have where is it going back? I need to be able to stream that data back. It can be pretty time consuming. And if it's on tape, it's even worse, right? Now, if you think about what you get with Spectrum Protect Plus and the notion around operational recovery, right? Business leaders feel like they've mitigated risk. They have a clear understanding of their data environment with a very robust catalog, because we see the entire environment, not just what's backed up, and that can help them to avoid reputation damage, right? They've also, by being able to recover a lot faster and not have any data loss, they keep people working longer, faster. Same thing at the knowledge worker and line of business side. They have access to all the data that they need. And from an IT infrastructure standpoint, recovering via snapshot, either themselves or putting it in the hands of the knowledge worker or the line of business, can be simple and easy. Single step, push a button, push a couple buttons, and you're off and working. That gives them time to keep the business running and let them kind of go off and focus on what might have happened to stop it and make sure it doesn't happen before. So some examples, right? We talked about the data catalog. The SLA-based protection puts the recovery in the hands of the people that need it. The instant access is really from the snapshot base. I also put in here some enhancements that we have from a performance standpoint. This kind of combines both Protect Plus and Protect. So I wanted to highlight some things that were happening in the Protect side of things. And Operations Center that also gives you full visibility into your overall operation. So ransomware and GDPR, same kind of thing, right? You feel risk, you feel costs, downtime is an issue, and recovery or getting that data back is kind of an issue for the infrastructure team. The one thing I did want to point out here, though, is because the catalog in the after side of things with and aligning to the catalog conversation we had before, because I'm cataloging all of that information and I can find all of that data, this notion around GDPR and the right to forget, now you have a simple and easy way to search everything and anything that you have, because we understand your infrastructure, to be able to say, hey, let's go remove that person or that set of credentials from the environment because they've asked for this notion around right to forget. Now, no solution is GDPR compliant. You have to be a company that is GDPR compliant. But this really helps you in satisfying a lot of the things that you will need to do in order to be more compliant towards GDPR. And again, we talked about the catalog, it really helps that. I also wanted to mention the air gap capability. So, people talk about cloud air gap. I think it's kind of a farce. I think the only true air gap is really tape, right? That is really the only thing that kind of gets it off the network. So I wanted to mention that. That's for the ransomware side of things. And then the security dashboard. So one of the things that we have that I also think is important is our security dashboard. As you're backing up information, right, we can tell through the security dashboard if things have changed, like the deduplication size, the number of files being backed up, the number of files being deduplicated. All of that gives us a hint that maybe something odd is happening in the environment. If your deduplication rate changes by, and you can set the percentage, but by, let's say, 10%, but your data is fundamentally the same, chances are something weird is happening in your environment. Maybe you understand it. Maybe you added a whole bunch of new systems and that's what's causing it. But maybe, just maybe, something's in there and we want to just highlight and alert you to the fact that something may be going on. So these are all tools to put in your hands to kind of be more proactive about what might be happening in your environment. So from a natural disaster and DR perspective, the one thing that I will say here, I think this is kind of, again, like I said, very repetitive, a lot of the same. But from an operational perspective, one of the things that you can do, because you can automate that recovery with Spectrum Protect Plus, you have the ability to automatically test your backup environments for disaster recovery purposes anytime you want without having to pull everybody in over the weekend. This really, really helps to ensure that you feel confidence that your environment is safe and running well. So some tools that help you do that, right? On the Protect side, the replication, right? We've added 3-site replication, right? And the automation and orchestration from Protect Plus to help you do that automatically. The fact that we integrate with the cloud and you can replicate data to the cloud, both with Protect or Protect Plus, gives you that opportunity to be able to use data in the cloud and offsite in case there is actual a disaster. Now, finally, and this is the important one, Pawel, we talked about earlier, right? The data reuse. And what I want to just do is highlight, right? The big piece here is that we mentioned from the line of business or from the business leader standpoint, finding new routes to market is really important to them, right? To be able to be competitive. And you do that by looking at your line of business and the application development team and say, hey, I need access. I need you to build me an application. And they're frustrated with IT, right? They typically ask IT for data. I think we've all gone through this. They ask IT for data. IT makes a comment back, what do you need it for? You go back and forth, where's it gonna go? Do you have access to it? Is it secure, right? Do we have space for it? Right? And then you have to provision that environment, and then you got to stream all the data back, right? That process can take weeks, I've heard months, right? What does that force the line of business to do? They create shadow IT projects, right? They take a copy of the data, they bring it up to the cloud, they turn on their tools, and they start working. Now, the downside is, right, is it probably violates corporate governance. You have no access, no understanding about what's out there, and it's a little scary for the business, right? The business is now at risk. So what we've tried to say now is that with tools like self-service and things like roles-based access, we can provide the line of business, whether it be the DBA or the VM admin or the applications team, access to be able to grab data that they need and use it, but only use it in specific locations, meaning it's already pre-provisioned, it's already, these are zero footprint snapshots, so we're not taking up a whole bunch of space, right, to be able to then go off and do the work that they need to do. And because the catalog keeps track of every snapshot that whether you created or they created, you know what's going on. And then at the end of the week, you can show them a report. Hey, you created 50 snapshots, right? Do you need them? Are you using them? Can we clean them up? Can we be efficient about our environment? You can provide a lot of insight and flexibility, both from a line of business perspective and the IT perspective back to the business leader. And by being able to do this, you're putting the hands and the data of the data in the hands of the people that need it and allowing them to kind of meet their objectives all the way up to the business leader. Again, you do that through self-service, our RESTful APIs that we've talked about. Spectrum Protect Plus was launched earlier in May up into the cloud. So if a line of business likes to work in the cloud, we can orchestrate the snapshot to come up in either IBM Cloud or AWS. The catalog keeps track of everything, and the roles-based access ensures that you have secure controls over everything. Paul, I didn't know if you had any further thoughts or comments around that particular scenario.
I think it's the common thing you showed is different scenarios, Steve, and everything let's say founded that it's all about the rapid access, you know, from the ransomware perspective, from the cloud disaster recovery perspective, from the DevOps perspective. So the world is demanding much more faster access than it used to have in the past. That's why right now tape is going as a major upload for the long-term retention, and the secondary data, storage data, is much more willing right now than the traditional backup. This is what I am understanding from your presentation. So, and the next thing is not only the SLA, but this catalog, yes? So the robust option to have a knowledge about all of the store data from the GDPR perspective. So this catalog gives us a possibility to fulfill the business needs from even the different articles like the data to be forgotten, for example. So this is a great preparation to have this knowledge for the future tasks. And this, the API, this is what all of the modern companies would like to go. So give us a tool that we can easily integrate with our third party, yes? So we like the UI, but we would like to hidden, yeah? We would like to connect to our DevOps. So I really like that everything is right now set up in one vision, one products, and one line of the products, I guess.
Very good. So what I think I want to do is I just want to say, there's some questions in here to ask yourself. Do you have a strategy like this? Are you thinking about this? And if not, these are some things I should be thinking about in order to kind of evolve my existing environment. Then we talk a little bit about the products, and you're going to have access to these slides as Pawel has said, right? And the whole goal is to really reinvent your business, right? Improve your SLAs, protect your business, elevate your staff, make sure you're exploiting your data. The other thing we've done in here is we've put some links to some additional assets, but what I'd like to do now is turn it over to John to maybe give you a quick, kind of visual of Spectrum Protect Plus and what it looks like and how you might think about using it and allow you guys to ask some questions.
Hey guys, this is John. I'm just working on bringing up my screen here, so give me just a moment.
I gave you the host, so you should be easily share your screen. So just let me know.
Can you guys see my screen now?
We see it.
Okay.
Brilliant.
So what you're looking at here is the dashboard for Spectrum Protect Plus. It is a virtual appliance that gets installed either in your VMware or Hyper-V environment. And this is essentially the opening screen. It provides you essentially with the information that you would expect to see out of any dashboard screen, right? It gives you some understanding of the health and wellness of your Spectrum Protect Plus appliance, as well as the environment, what you're protecting, how you're protecting it, etc. So if you look at the top there, you'll see the number of VMs and applications that you're protecting, as well as Steve was talking about earlier about discovering and understanding the environment even if we're not protecting it. You see the unprotected summary, so you can see the number of VMs and applications that are discovered but not currently being protected. Below that, if you look, you'll see the information on the backup storage utilization. Spectrum Protect Plus is a disk-based repository for the snapshots of the VM or the hypervisor and application environments that you're taking. In this case, you can see we actually have 3 separate repositories defined. And the reason that you would have multiple repositories defined is where the data exists in your organization, right? If it exists at multiple sites, you may want to have repositories at different sites to provide that local protection and recovery, as well as targets for replication. In addition, you may want multiple vSnap repositories for performance, right? You want to spread the load of data movement across multiple targets. And so you can see here that we've got 3 vSnap repositories or backup storage targets defined, and it gives you some information around their current utilization and things like that. To the right of that, you're going to see some summary information, most interestingly around your data dedupe and data compression ratios. Those vSnap appliances, the targets for the snapshots that Spectrum Protect Plus is taking are capable of both deduplication and compression, and those are both settings that you can control, and that will depend highly on the type of data that's being protected, whether or not compressing it and deduplicating it is worth it. But you do have control over whether or not you want to do one or both of those. Below that, you'll see the SLAs, right? The SLAs are the RPO and RTO requirements that you've defined for various data sets in your environment. And as I'm sure most of you are aware, not all data is created equal. So you likely will have multiple SLAs, right, or definitions for the frequency with which you want to protect that data, where you want to store that data, whether it be within Spectrum Protect Plus or whether you want to offload that data out to Spectrum Protect, and the retention of that data, right? How long do you need to retain that data? And finally, do you want to replicate that data between one Spectrum Protect Plus vSnap repository and another to provide site level or location level disaster recovery capabilities? Finally, you'll see some CPU and system information there. This is just the resources being consumed within Spectrum Protect Plus to make sure that you have a handle on whether or not you need to add additional memory or how much CPU you're consuming, things like that. Steve had mentioned that Spectrum Protect Plus has the capability of going out and essentially discovering the data in your environment either at a hypervisor level or at an application level. And so you can see if I select hypervisor and then I select VMware, right, and I go to backup, you'll see in the upper left-hand corner here, Manage vCenter. You can see that we actually have two vCenters defined, and the way that Spectrum Protect Plus communicates with the hypervisor is through the APIs that the VMware or Hyper-V hypervisors expose. And so everything that Spectrum Protect Plus does is agentless. There's no need to install any agents on any hosts or anything of that nature. And so once we've got the vCenters defined, meaning we know where they live in the environment, right? We have their name and or IP address and an account on that vCenter that allows us to execute the protection and recovery tasks that we need. What we'll do then is actually just go out and discover all of the virtual machines on that vCenter. So you can see here, if I select this XIV185 vCenter, it's going to go out and it's going to reach out to that vCenter through the APIs, and it's going to provide me a list, in this case, of all of the virtual machines. If I wanted to look at this differently, right, if I wanted to filter this based on something like VM tags, right, that Steve was saying we support, right? So if you've got an administrator who's tagged all of the SQL Server VMs, for example, right, and I were to choose to look at this from a tag perspective, it's going to go out and it's going to say, okay, here are all of the tags that have been defined on this vCenter. And what I can do then is I can select one of the tags, and I can come down here to select SLA, and I can choose a particular SLA for that tag. What this means is that any current VMs that have this tag or any future VMs that get created with this tag will all be protected by, in this case, the gold SLA policy, right? And obviously you will have already defined the parameters of that gold SLA policy, the frequency with which you're taking the snapshots, the retention of those snapshots, whether you're offloading to Spectrum Protect Plus, and whether you are replicating. So the nice thing about, one of the nice things about Spectrum Protect Plus is that I can sort of define the protection at a variety of different levels within vCenter, right? I can do it at the tag level, I can do it at the data store level, I can do it at the VM level. So let's say, for example, I wanted to select at the data store level. Right, I can basically say, again, that any VMs that are on this data store or any future VMs that get added to this data store will automatically be protected based on whatever policy assigned to that data store.
John, can I have just one question?
Sure.
Because we have it on chat, so what kind of the, let's say, account permissions you need to have to connect to the VMware on the Hyper-V?
Yep, we have...
so what rights? Mm-hmm.
We have a document that defines the exact set of rights and permissions that we need, that we can certainly provide for you. It is not necessary to use an admin account. We can use the admin account, but if you want to define a separate account that has just the absolute required permissions, we have the documentation to provide that.
Okay, thank you. So you can go for it.
So in this case, if I look at the view of the vCenter at the VM level, right, again, it'll go out and it'll list all of the VMs being managed by this particular vCenter. And if I scroll down, what you're going to see is just not only the list, but I can actually look for particular VMs. Let's say I wanted to look, for example, for any VMs with the name Linux. So you can see here I've got a number of different VMs that have Linux in their name. And you can see that Linux 1 and Linux 2 are currently being protected by the bronze policy. Right? If I wanted to change that, or I wanted to look at something, I can select the VM and again go to select SLA policy, and now I can change the SLA assigned to that particular VM. I also have the options button here. What this allows me to do is two things primarily. One is it lets you define whether or not the snapshot that Spectrum Protect Plus takes of the VM is going to be application consistent or whether simply crash consistent. And that will depend entirely, obviously, on the contents of that VM, and you can define whether or not you want it to be application or crash consistent. And you also have the capability of using this catalog file metadata. If I select that, what that's going to do is not only protect the virtual machine at the VM level, right, using the APIs, but Spectrum Protect Plus is then going to open up those VMDK files and catalog all of the files contained within that VM. What that allows us to do is provide file level recovery from within Spectrum Protect Plus, right? So once I assign the VM to a particular policy and I determine whether or not I want to catalog the files contained within that VM, I would then kick off a backup or let the schedule define when that backup begins. We'll take a backup and we'll then be able to recover. Right? And as I mentioned, we have the capability of recovering both individual files, the entire VM, or any individual VMDK associated with that VM. The same exact process that I just walked you through for VMware exists for both Hyper-V and the applications. If I were to look at this at an application level, you can see that currently Spectrum Protect Plus supports Oracle and SQL. If, for example, I wanted to look at my Oracle environment, again, I would go to Application, Oracle, Backup. I will have defined under Manage Application Servers here all of my Oracle hosts using the same methodology, providing the name or IP address of the Oracle host and an account on that Oracle host that will allow us to leverage the Oracle APIs, including RMAN, for the protection and recovery of the Oracle environment. I should mention that the applications SQL and Oracle can exist either on a virtual host or a physical host. From Spectrum Protect Plus's perspective, it does not matter. We are protecting the application at the application level, speaking directly to the application, so we don't need to worry about whether it resides on a physical host or a virtual host. So you can see here that I have an Oracle instance. If I select that Oracle instance, you'll see all of the databases that are part of that Oracle instance. In this case, we have just a single database called Oracle, and you can see here that it is being protected currently by the Silver policy. So as Steve was mentioning earlier about the proactive versus reactive catalog and whether or not your application, data protection application, has the capability of understanding your environment prior to you being running jobs on it, Spectrum Protect Plus has that capability because of the fact that we're able to discover the virtual machines as well as the applications, SQL and Oracle. And over time, we'll add additional hypervisors and additional applications from a supportability perspective. So now that I've actually defined my SLA, I've discovered the applications and virtual environment, I have added those resources to an SLA and defined the options I want around that. I've actually protected them, right? I've done a number of protections, right? The initial snapshot will always be a full. Every subsequent snapshot is an incremental, capturing only those blocks that have changed between the previous Spectrum Protect Plus snapshot and the current. And then I would now be in a position where I could recover the data, right? And as I mentioned, you have lots of different kinds of recovery or levels at which you can recover. The first is a file recovery. So for example, here, if I click on File Restore and I wanted to look just at all of the files that have been cataloged by Spectrum Protect Plus, I can just click on that search button without any parameters, and it's essentially going to give me a list of all of the files, the host that those files were protected from, and what the OS of that host is. I also have the capability of searching based on filters. So for example, if I wanted to search for just PDF files, right, I can do that. I can define that, and I can say, okay, go out and search.
Just one thing, because there's lots of right now on the chat, so I think you're on the right spot right now. So could you a little bit explain, before you will access this PDF, how is actually the index processing is going during backup VMs? Because we have a few questions, how it's going, where the metadata is stored. And so could you a little bit go deeper into the backup process, indexing process, and the metadata process, okay?
I can. I have a hard stop coming up from a time perspective, so I can certainly explain that.
just few minutes, no worries.
So the way that Spectrum Protect Plus performs the catalog of the file metadata is to take the snapshot of the virtual environment, internally mount that snapshot, crack open the VMDKs or the hard disks associated with that VM, catalog all of the files. That catalog index information is stored temporarily on the host of that particular, where that catalog is running, and then is copied to the Spectrum Protect Plus server at the end of the indexing process. And that index is then stored within the Spectrum Protect Plus vSnap repository, and the catalog metadata added to the Spectrum Protect Plus MongoDB catalog.
So the brilliant answer. I think lots of user group professionals who wanted to have this knowledge. So please go forward.
Sure. So as I said, once you've got the catalog here, you can search for individual files. You can search for types of files. You can search for path locations. You can filter it based on a particular virtual machine, right? So I wanted to say I only wanted to see the files cataloged from Linux 1, right? I can do that. In this case, I'm filtering for any PDF files that are on Linux 1. And so you can see when I do that, it brings it down that there are only 2 PDF files that have been cataloged from Linux 1. I could then choose the recovery point I wanted for a particular file, right? So you can see here that we took a snapshot on the 20th and the 21st. Let's say I wanted the file back from the 21st, right? I've just corrupted the file. If I click on options, it now gives me the capability of determining where I wanted to recover that file to, right? Do I want to recover it to, for example, the original location that it came from? Do I want to recover it to an alternate location on the same host? Do I want to recover it, in fact, from a VMware VM to a Hyper-V VM, right? I can do that because, again, we're just essentially recovering an individual file. So I've got a lot of flexibility with my file level recovery here. Once you've done the protection of the virtual machines as well as the applications, you also have the capability of recovering those virtual machines and applications, right, rather than just individual files. So if I come back to VMware under Hypervisor and I go to Restore, right, you can see again if I select my vCenter server and I scroll through here, here are the 4 VMs that we're currently protecting, right, Linux 1, Linux 2, Windows 1, and Windows 2. If I wanted to recover any of those virtual machines, I simply would select the virtual machine and choose the restore point. So let's say Linux Windows 1. If I select this restore point arrow here, that's going to expand and show me the list of all of the available point in times that I have from a recovery perspective. Importantly, it will also tell me where those images reside. So you can see, for example, that my image from the 21st resides within the vSnap repository, the local vSnap 2 Spectrum Protect Plus. But you can see also that I have an image from the 21st that resides out on Spectrum Protect, right? And I have the capability of recovering that image regardless of where it resides, whether it resides within the Spectrum Protect Plus vSnap repository or from Spectrum Protect. The way that I would do that would simply be to choose this blue arrow to select it. It adds it to my restore list here. This is the equivalent of a shopping cart, right? When you go online shopping and you add items to your shopping cart and then you execute the order. But what we've done here is we've added this Windows virtual machine recovery point, right? This June 21st recovery point. And now I have the capability of recovering this Windows virtual machine. I can go to options here, and this is going to allow me to determine a few things. It's going to allow me to determine where I want to perform the recovery, either back to the original environment from which it was protected, or to an alternate vCenter environment, whether that vCenter be local or remote, as long as Spectrum Protect Plus has connectivity to it. So it will allow me to choose where I want to perform the recovery. It will also allow me to choose the type of recovery. The test recovery is a mount of the data, so there is no data movement between the Spectrum Protect Plus vSnap repository and the vCenter. We're simply mounting the images out of the vSnap repository and presenting them to the presenting them to the target vCenter, whichever target vCenter you've selected. I also have the capability of doing some advanced things like changing network settings, right? If I wanted to, for example, do a test restore, I have the capability of changing the IP information or the networking information of the VM. If I wanted to recover it, for example, into a sandbox environment for my test dev and my application developers. I have the capability of running pre and post scripting. If I wanted to do something more complicated, I wanted to recover the VM and bring up a database or something like that, I can use that pre and post scripting capability to do some of those functions. So I have the capability of recovering, as I've shown you, the individual files from a particular hypervisor VM, or I can recover the entire VM, right? Essentially a bare metal recovery of that virtual machine. Or I can choose to recover any individual VMDKs, right? So you can see here, if I change what I'm recovering and I select Windows 1 here, it's going to show me, in this case, that there's only a single hard disk associated with this virtual machine, but if we had multiple hard disks, you'd see them all displayed here, and I could simply select again by choosing the point in time that I wanted. Right? I can choose to add that, and this will now recover this this volume or this hard disk, right, as a mount. It'll mount it to whichever VM I choose as the target. So that allows me then to go to that VM and browse that volume if I needed to look or find something. Allows me to drag and drop files, all of those sorts of things. Does that make sense? The same holds true for my Oracle and my SQL environments. Again, if I were to go back to Application, Oracle, and Restore now, again, you'll see my Oracle instance here. If I open this up, you'll see my Oracle database that I've protected. And again, if I expand the restore point to show me all of the restore points, you can see that I, for example, have a number of different restore points here, right? And you can see which policy they are coming from and where they exist, right? So these are all local to Spectrum Protect Plus. But the same process, right? If I were to choose that I wanted to recover this particular point in time image, it adds it to my restore list. I go to my options. I can choose where I want to restore it, which Oracle host I want to restore it to. If I want to change the database name as a part of that restore, you know, and I've got a number of other advanced options that I can leverage at the time to not only recover the data files back to the application host, but bring that application online in the host so that I can use it, right? It becomes a fully read-writable copy of that application. A couple of other things I want to show you. One, we talked about the SLA policy, and if I wanted to either leverage the existing policies, you can see here, or I have the capability of creating my own policies, right? I may have different settings that I want to implement for different data sets. This allows
and John, an interruption again, just clarify how it's working the physical-based protection. So if we are going beyond the virtual machine, how the processes look like. We have a question, do we need to use the agents? So could you, again, clarify this thing?
Sure. There are no agents. Spectrum Protect Plus doesn't use agents for any of its functions, whether it be protection or recovery. For physical hosts that are running Oracle or SQL, we are going to be able to protect the application, SQL or Oracle. We are not protecting the physical host itself. We're not protecting the file systems on that host. We're not performing a system state backup of that physical host. We are simply protecting the application, SQL or Oracle, on that physical host, leveraging the APIs provided by those applications. So in the case of Oracle, we're leveraging RMAN. And the way that we're interacting with the Oracle application is via the injection of microcode onto the host at the time of the protection, right? So basically, when we first go to do a protection of an Oracle environment, we're going to inject a couple of services onto that host, right? Those services are going to run only at the time of the protection or the recovery, but we basically inject some code onto that host, and then we leverage an account on that host as the service owner, essentially, right, to allow us to, again, perform the interaction between Spectrum Protect Plus and Oracle or SQL to quiesce, snapshot, and copy those images to the Spectrum Protect Plus environment.
And we have a few questions about the Azure implementation. So I think it's a little bit about the future. So how the SPP will go and address the Azure machines that's running on the Azure cloud.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any information from a technical perspective of how that's going to work. That's not currently a supported feature within Spectrum Protect Plus. It is on the roadmap for development and should be available in future releases, but I don't have any information currently about how that will be implemented or the process that will be used in the protection and recovery of those machines.
Okay, I think it's clear. I think so, John. So 5 minutes. So please feel free to finish what you have planning. So right now the policy. So I will not interrupt you, and then we'll go to the Q&A. Okay?
Sure. So as I mentioned, you can either leverage the existing predefined SLAs that are a part of Spectrum Protect Plus. They are gold, silver, and bronze, or you can create your own. As you can see, when you create your own here, you have the capability of defining not only the frequency of the snapshots that you want to take for any data set that's been assigned to this SLA, but the retention for that. You also have the capability of defining where you want that data to be written to, which vSnap repository, and you can see that we've got 3 vSnap repositories defined, as I mentioned, and as you saw within the dashboard. So you can choose where you want that data to be written to or copied to. You have the capability of determining whether or not you want to replicate any data that is being protected by this SLA, and if so, the frequency with which you want to perform that replication, as well as where you want that data replicated to. Again, which of the remote or local vSnap repositories do you want to replicate the data to, right? You also have the capability of determining whether or not you want to offload to Spectrum Protect, and if so, the frequency with which you want to offload to Spectrum Protect. And again, whether or not you want to keep the same retention when you replicate, right? I'm sorry, I'm confusing you there. You can replicate between vSnap repositories, right? And you can determine the replication frequency and the retention, right? And for your offload to Spectrum Protect, you can choose whether or not you want to offload the data to Spectrum Protect. If you choose to offload it, Spectrum Protect Plus, is going to offload the data to Spectrum Protect to a particular storage or container pool that sits behind Spectrum Protect. So that allows you to leverage tape or object storage or something like that for long-term retention of the data. Keeping the data within Spectrum Protect Plus, meanwhile, for your operational recovery. The last thing would just be the access. Steve had mentioned the determination of whether or not you want to allow self-service, right? So you can define resource groups. Let's say I want to define all of my SQL hosts as a resource group. I can then create a user. The SQL DBA can, I can create, a user. For example, I can create a SQL DBA user, and I can assign the resource group to that user, and then I can define a role for that user, meaning what actions do I want that user to be able to take on the resource group that they have access to. So that's just a very high-level overview of Spectrum Protect Plus and its operations and how you go about performing, some of the basic tasks within it. So I'm going to turn it back over to Steve and the guys here, and we'll go from there. Is anybody out there?
Yeah.
Steve, is anybody there?
Yep. Paulo, you gonna wrap the meeting up? There you go.
Yeah, I have some connectivity issues, but no worries. So I think we have a few more questions, but I think easily wrap it up and send it to our group. So right now we have last 10 minutes. So you can go, you can unmute, and you can ask the question to John if you have some technical. From the business perspective, later on we'll try to answer. John, could you give me just a host so I will control what's going on the Zoom? Just click right on my name and certainly and make host.
Okay, hold on.
We have a question, John. Do we recommend to take a snapshot from the SQL Oracle VM guest without any application level using the SPP? So the client-based snapshot, so this VM level snapshot or the agent snapshot. So what's your pick?
That really depends entirely on your recovery use case, what it is you're trying to do. For example, if you're trying to facilitate a test dev or agile development, then you're going to want to take a snapshot at the application level. If you have a database that is of a high transaction rate, then you're probably going to want to take that snapshot at the database level or the application level. If you're just concerned about recovering the entire VM, then you can take the snapshot at the VM level. You can actually do both. You could take a snapshot of the VM, once a week, but take a snapshot of the application once an hour. It really almost entirely depends on your use case from a recovery perspective. Pal, we can't hear you.
But you know that I said something. It's good.
Yes.
Great. I just asked, do you have any question to myself or John or Steve? So feel free to ask. We have a few minutes more. It's your time, so feel free. Don't be shy. Are you saying DB level snapshot? So it's again coming back to this SQL Oracle VM guest.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, it depends almost entirely on what your use case from a recovery perspective is. Personally, I think taking the application snapshot gives you a lot more flexibility. You can recover to alternate hosts. You can interact with the log file in terms of truncating the log file at the time of the snapshot. So, that's my opinion. It gives you much more flexibility. But like I said, it depends almost entirely on what your use case is from a recovery perspective.
Okay. I don't know if you reckon that Steve Keniston, if he's going offline, he has a really good photo. So take a look what's going on Zoom. He just changed his face. Can we expect agentless file recovery module in Spectrum Protect in the future?
I'm not the right resource to ask that question. I don't know.
Okay, so I will definitely speak with the offering team, but I think from the VMware and other hypervisors point of view, IBM will have much more focus on the SPP. So this is my personal opinion, but I will advise and give you the answer on the user group. So keep this question on the user group, please, Vinod. We have some nice birds there.
I do. It's actually nice enough to have the window open.
It's okay, team. So John, I'll start with you. So personally, I would like to thank you for your effort to show and explain how the SPP looks like today. I think the future from the IBM is quite excited. So lots of good movements we just right now started to doing it. So looking forward for the next session with you and Steve. Steve, thank you for your time and sharing with your huge knowledge about the data protection markets, etc. And to all of the user group, just keep follow us, follow me on the LinkedIn, join the group and see some activities. We'll have more this kind of the webinars, and give us a peek on the user group what type of the next webinar we'd like to see and hear about. So I will record it. I will send the presentation slide share, and I will post it up. So if your friends would like to hear us, watch us, just let me know with the private message. I will give you the proper links. So again, Stephen and John, it was a pleasure. For all of you, thank you for joining us. Stay in touch, and hopefully to hear you and see you soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye.